I wanted to make this video on basic tips for DayZ. When I first started playing DayZ, I struggled to find out how the game worked, and I wanted to find out tips on how I could quickly improve. Not quickly become a great player, but just so I could learn the basics quite early on. I did find a couple videos, but I just felt that now, looking back on them, they didn't point out some things that I'm hoping to point out in this video, and if they did, or some of them did and I just missed them, then I apologise for that. Another thing to add, these tips obviously aren't for very experienced DayZ players. A lot of people will know them. If you're like an average DayZ player, you play for a couple hours, then won't play it for a couple days or so, and it's not really your main game, then some of these tips may help, but I can imagine these tips are mainly going to help newer players with under like 300 hours. And just to add, I haven't thought of these like from myself. Some of these tips I was taught by stuff like streamers, to speaking to them, and when they would just say, they would speak to the chat and say, you should do this, and stuff like that. That's a great way to pick up tips too, is to watch streamers. Because YouTube videos, they usually just show the action. When you look at a streamer, they assess the situation, they will say where they went wrong, they'll say what they did well, why they're doing a particular thing. So if you really do want to improve, watching a streamer is a brilliant way to do it. First off, I want to talk about gear. Of course, you will most likely learn where the best loot locations are over time. For example, there are certain buildings that have better loot in than others, there's certain cars, police stations. Fuck, 060, isn't it? Okay, maybe forget police stations. But what I wanted to talk about is not gearing, but managing your gear. This is something I've only recently been paying more attention to. It's something I've known, but I haven't just really been putting it into effect. And by this, I mean stuff like putting your bullets, bandages and food into your pants, since that is the most least likely place to get shot while you're being shot at. If your pants are full, then your backpack is definitely the best next choice. Personally, I like the improvised backpack because it is low profile and it's small enough to stop me from hoarding too many items whilst being very small on your back, so it's less of a hitbox too. I have also heard that putting items in the bottom of your backpack does reduce the chance of it being hit. Of course, I'm not 100% sure. I've only heard that. I can't even remember where I heard it from, so someone in the comments probably knows if that's true or false, but I just couldn't really find anything. But again, I heard it on, I think it was a Facebook group for a server I'm on. And the last tip for managing your gear is always pick up protector cases or cooking pots. I've only recently been doing this because, again, I watched it in a stream. Someone told me about it. Of course, I knew what protector cases did, but I just never really put them to effect. So what I personally do now is I put them in my vest or my shirt, depending on what's like my main chest protection, because that's the most likely place to get shot. So for me, it just makes sense putting it there. And what you really want to be putting in these protector cases and cooking pots are stuff like bullets, extra bandages, or extra food, depending on what you have on you. The next tip is goals. Now, this is more of a tip for enjoyment, I would say. It wouldn't really give you an advantage in any situation, but I feel to have fun in DayZ, you always should have goals, especially when playing on your own. It also stops the game from being stale, since when I first started playing the game, I usually just found myself running to the northwest trying to get kills and die. But what do I mean by goals? Well, if I'm not energized, I eat. If I'm not hydrated, I drink. If I'm hot, I swim. I then look for supplies, like always having a splint on me for a broken leg, and that takes some effort to find because you have to get the sticks, chop them down and whatnot. Also, I like working on a gun before going into a high PvP area, so if I find an MP5, I go to all the medical buildings and all the police stations to try and build on that gun. Same with a blaze. If I get a blaze, I try and find Winchester, vice versa, all those types of guns, coast weapons. I try and improve on them the best as I can before I go to a military area. So it is really simple stuff, but again, this for me is just a tip on improving enjoyment, and most people probably know this one. And my final tip is, now you can quote me on this, this is the best tip you will ever receive in DayZ. There is no decent DayZ player out there, mediocre DayZ player or whatever, that will disagree with me on this. The best tip you will ever receive is to die. Okay, now, within reason. I'm not saying go out and purposely die, like run laps of the northwest just to be shot at. I'm saying it's a game and you can't fear death. It will happen. The game is about survival and you will die. The main reason for fearing death is losing your loot, but you can't fear the loss of your loot. Well, because it's not really your loot, it belongs to the next guy who kills you. This is something that affects, I would say, 90% of all new players. And it definitely affected me when I first started playing the game. This is also something a lot of my friends suffer with that I play DayZ with, which is dying. We all loot up in an area, we get semi-geared characters, and we get ready to storm the northwest. and then they just bottle it. They decide that their gear is way too valuable to just risk in the blink of a couple of seconds to lose it all. Guys, that wasn't meant to be a shot at any of you. Please don't flame me after you see this video. But at the end of the day, the only way you're going to improve your PvP ability is to die. And after you die, assess your death. Be open and admit that you did something wrong. You should have gone that way instead of going that way. You should have not have fought and got in a better position before you started firing. You should have waited for a better opportunity, or you should have took the opportunity earlier. That is what DayZ's about. And also, sometimes you will die, you will do everything right, you could be outgunned, or you could just get DayZ'd and desync fucks you. At the end of the day, death is the prime factor of the game. Death is the sign that you have completed the game, and from there, you start the game again.